me, have you always lived in the Yakima Valley, or did you come
Yeah.
to the Yakima Valley?
Yeah, I grew up actually just outside of Yakima toward a town called Natchez.
Ah, gotcha.
So I graduated from there in 1998, and I went to school at UW. My family was not in agriculture. My dad was a carpenter and my mom was a nurse. And so I got out of the valley like most young people do, and I went to school at UW. And then around my junior year there, I got the wine bug from a professor. And then the UW didn't have a program in enology or vid at the time, so I just started reading everything I could. I definitely fell in love with initially the enology side of winemaking, but the more I learned about it, I liked the aspect that it's not all, science, and the viticulture was very intriguing to me. And coming from over here, living in Seattle, I kind of realized I missed my rural area, so it was a good way to come back and hold me back here. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
So so you are the winemaker for Gilbert.
Yep.
And then you also have your own brand, JB Neufeld, which is, let's talk about the cabs. So, because that's really what we wanted to talk with you about, because I know you're a big cab lover, and that's what you're focusing on with that label, right?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I didn't know from the beginning I wanted to focus on Cabernet Sauvignon. It kind of came to me later on. There were a couple Bordeaux wines that I'd had before I really knew anything about wine, and I didn't know what I loved about them at the time. And then after I'd started learning about wine and I reflected on those wines, I started to think I knew what it was that I loved about them. And Cabernet Sauvignon was a big component of those wines, and I'd started tasting a lot of cabs in Washington. The big names like Quilceda Creek and Leonetti, when I got into it, those were like the icons. So there was inspiration there, but I started delving into it, and Yakima Valley as an AVA, I started just learning that it's such a diverse AVA. There's so many microclimates and terroir. I just felt like it was a good choice for Cabernet Sauvignon. Initially, I wanted to do just vineyard designates to like show people this is terroir. Like anything, the more I got into it, the more I learned. I started personally, my palate, learning that I felt like I could craft a better Cabernet by blending sites. So that's kind of where I'm at now with my label, is still focused Cabernet Sauvignon, Yakima Valley, but now I'm kind of looking more at the blending process. I'll still have a vineyard designate,
Right.
but yeah, so Red Mountain AVA, it's in the Yakima Valley AVA. A lot of people forget that. It's a great site. It's like structure, ripe fruit. I like to use it kind of as the foundation of a blend. And then as you start going up the valley, you start to get into cooler areas. And I find the wines on the palate sort of take on a softer, almost chalkier tannin. And in the nose, they get a lot more complexity, I say. Like sometimes you can get vegetal or herbaceous notes, but what I'm shooting for is more of that floral character. And then start blending, Red Mountain with these upper valley sites. I've started getting fruit, like I was saying, out of Red Willow. That's a really unique site. It doesn't fit that upper valley cooler site profile of this chalkier tannin and floral notes. I've only worked with it now for 2 vintages, but so far it's really unique. It takes on a more earthy minerality type character on the nose. There's still some dark fruit there for sure, but almost a structure similar to Red Mountain. So it's pretty cool.
Where are you pulling from? What block do you have?
So I'm my Cabernet. Oh gosh, I think they call it the 98 block. John's gonna kill me.
No.
But anyway, it's north of the chapel. It's basically the northernmost section of their vineyard,
Okay.
Before it goes into the foothills.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, it's clone 8. most of it's clone 8, and I forget what the other clone was, maybe 6 or 9, I can't remember.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And then I'm going to get some Merlot from their Marcoux
From
block.
Market, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, when we drove up there last night, we drove up and around the Peninsula block and then up to the chapel and kind of looked down on Marcoux and Olney Creek, I think, Olney Springs, whatever it is just past that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm actually, the other thing I was going to say too, where I'm enjoying now is the new clones that Washington has.
Oh.
So a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon in Washington, I feel like most people's impression of Washington Cab Sauv in general, not just Yakima Valley, but the state in general, is based from clone 8.
Okay.
It's the most widely planted clone. It's kind of what we had back in the day. Up until recently, I want to say it was 2009, Washington State got access to some clones that actually came up through California. It was a California company that came up and planted them. Clones 337, 191, and 169. 337, I've kind of been geeking out about. They're still really young vines, but they have a different profile from clone 8. They're a little bit more red fruit, a little bit grittier of a tannin, and rather than being vegetal when they're picked green, they're more herbaceous. So I'm really excited, just because for me, blending, I think it'll kind of change what Cabernet Sauvignon in Washington can be.
Excellent.
Yeah.